Welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture, and in continuation with the series on Indian sociological tradition, today I am going to talk about G.S. Ghurye's idea of Indian society. So, we know that G.S. Ghurye played a dominant role in laying the foundation of sociology in India and contributed significantly in terms of establishing sociology as a discipline. So, let us try to understand what was his idea of Indian society. This becomes very important because he was not only kind of giving us a theoretical understanding of Indian society, but kind of engaging in a lot of field based work and empirical work in order to give us an understanding of what society of India was. So, when we look into is that we are kind of convinced with the idea that the appropriate framework for the study of Indian society was needed, a deep indigenous knowledge of Indian society and culture, and that such knowledge should not be dependent on theories built by outsiders. And this is a very crucial kind of an understanding to evolve an indigenous one's own self understanding of the society, because much of the theorization of Indian society prior to Indian sociologists were kind of coming in from the Orientalist perspective, which kind of considered India as a society which had to be understood with reference to the Western society, and in that comparative framework, in an evolutionary framework, Indian society was kind of seen as undergoing large scale change. And when the evolution, most of the thinkers who were studying Indian society was kind of understanding in terms of the caste system, in terms of the village and family, and they were kind of giving us an argument that Indian society was a closed society, and with industrialization, with industrial revolution, there was a shift from caste to class, from village to the city, and joint family becoming nuclear family. So, these kind of understanding were all coming in from the outsiders. It was very important to kind of question these understanding and evolve an indigenous study, and this is what Ghurye kind of started with this important task to understand society in India. And as we already dealt with a number of lectures, we are clear by now that he has written extensively on a wide range of issues, including caste, family, kinship, archaeology, tribes, ancient India, cultural history, Indian costume, urban societies, social change, architecture, contemporary politics, even the in terms of understanding the nature of political conflict that was part of Indian society. So, from very kind of a depiction of Indian society as a caste based society to understanding contemporary society as a nation in terms of the political conflict. So, we see that he was very much interested in providing a holistic understanding of India. So, when we look into his area of research, as I have already said, there is large number of areas which kind of reflects his understanding. So, one of the most important understanding of Ghurye is to kind of do away with the caste tribe dichotomy that was used to understand Indian society. And when we look into his contribution on tribes, we see that his tribes were kind of considered as general as well as specific. He wrote a general book on scheduled tribes in which he dealt with the historical, administrative and social dimension of Indian tribes. He also wrote on specific tribes such as the Kolis in Maharashtra. So, the understanding of tribal society as integral to understanding of India was very important, and this is kind of reflected in his work on tribe. The next important work that was very important in terms of understanding Indian society was the concept of nationalist discourse and nationalism. So, in his work, The Aboriginals, So-Called and Their Future, which was published in 1943 and it was republished again as The Scheduled Tribes, he gives evidence of the influence of nationalism and his desire to locate the unity of nation sociological. And this could be the idea why he was kind of considering caste and tribe as a contonym, because what was behind his mind was to give us India which was a united India despite the diversity. So, though they were kind of the tribal population which was kind of considered as aboriginal or uncivilized, though they were kind of different in terms of the culture and civilization, yet they were an integral part of Indian society. And here is where he is kind of attacking the colonial tribal policy of protectionism. So during the colonial period, there were a lot of policies which were kind of formulated in order to kind of give us an understanding of tribe as an isolated group and kind of keep them separate from the rest of the population. So the policy of isolation was not accepted by Ghurye because of his nationalist inclination, and therefore he kind of regarded the creation of excluded zone or an excluded separate area for the tribal as a colonial strategy of divide and rule. So if we look into the very important work of Ghurye Elwin, who kind of was advocating a policy of greater integration of tribes into the mainstream society rather than protection through isolation. So when we do kind of understand the tribal policies in India, there are 2 or 3 policies. One is the policy of isolation, which is to kind of create almost a kind of a park, an isolated park where the tribals would be cut off from the rest of the population in order to protect their culture. The other is in terms of assimilation, that they are part of the Indian culture and society and they can be protected by being assimilated into the Indian mainstream. So Ghurye was in kind of for the assimilation process and not for isolation. And when we look into tribe, we also need to understand Ghurye's perspective on tribe caste distinction. Ghurye, there was no distinction between caste and tribe, and it was futile to search for the separate identity of tribe as aboriginal. This was again something which was in contrast to what the colonial discourse was giving us. The colonial discourse was telling us that the caste and tribe are completely separate and they kind of nothing which is common among them, and therefore the tribals kind of needed isolation. But unlike the colonial scholar, Ghurye believed that most of the tribe had been Hinduized after a long period of contact with Hindus. He regarded tribe as imperfectly integrated classes of Hindi society or backward Hindu rather than the own kind of aboriginal. So you know this process of assimilation and acculturation was going in India for a very long time. So this process of those who were able to integrate or become part of the Indian society were kind of categorized as caste, and those who were left behind, say less semi-civilized, or they were not able to adopt the lifestyle of Hindu, they were kind of labeled as the tribal. So for Ghurye, the backwardness was due to their imperfect integration into the Hindu society. So he's saying that there is no distinction between them, only what kind of makes them backward, or what makes them not be identified as a part of mainstream society is that this category or this group has not been able to completely integrate themselves into the mainstream society. And he gives us the example of Santhas, Bhils, Gond, who live in South Central India, and these are the category of people whose integration or assimilation has kind of remained incomplete. Ghurye at the same time holds the view that the grand historical process of merger between two communities has almost been completed. So this is kind of a historical account in which the assimilation started, and it was kind of incomplete when we kind of look into the colonial time. But the process, by the time it kind of the time that Ghurye is documenting Indian society, he is of opinion that this has kind of process has completed, and they have kind of been observed into certain Hindu values and style of life through contact with Hindu social group. So the integration has been more or less completed. Under the influence, and he's giving us how an argument, he's telling why do we think that the tribe has almost the assimilation has been complete. He's giving us the example that that many of the tribal culture has kind of undergone change, and the tribes have given up drinking liquor, they have started receiving education and improved their agriculture. So therefore, that is why he is calling it as a continuum, that caste from the tribe kind of an identity transformation is happening, and it would gradually kind of convert into a caste. So in this context, Hindu voluntary organizations such as Ramakrishna Mission and Arya Samaj, they played a constructive role for the development of the tribes. In his later works of northeastern tribes, Ghurye documented sexist trends. His idea of caste getting incorporated into the mainstream or becoming caste is also subject to critique. And there are many anthropologists and sociologists who could argue that it's not that when transformation takes place, the tribe transforms into caste. The critique is very important, but then it is also important to see that he is kind of critiquing the colonial construct of the tribal society. And he presents a lot of data on practices, habits, tribes of central India in order to kind of support the argument that the tribe society, when they undergo social transformation, gets incorporated into the caste system. He quotes extensively from various writings and reports to show that Katoris, Bhuyas, Oran, Khons and Gorkus, these are all tribals from different parts of India, have substantially adopted Hinduism as their religion. So once the process of acculturation is completed, they are kind of adopting lifestyle, they are changing the culture and living pattern, they are kind of incorporating Hinduism as their religion. Because if we look into again the divide between the tribe and caste during the colonial period, there were a lot of scholars who would give us the dichotomy as caste as worshippers of Hinduism and tribes as having their own tribal religion. So this according to Ghurye, this distinction is no longer valid because the tribals are kind of converting into Hinduism. He suggests that economic motivation behind the adopting of Hinduism is very strong among the tribe. They can come out of the tribal craft and adopt a specialized type of occupation which is in demand in society. So this argument of social transformation among tribe, he is also linking it to the industrialization and the change towards the shift from agricultural to industrial industry. So he's saying that though tribals community were engaged in their own crafts and handicrafts, but as modernity has come in and society is moving towards the industry, science and industry, they had to kind of learn certain skills, certain kind of jobs which could be more beneficial rather than kind of doing their own traditional occupation. Now, so besides tribe, the next important issue that is very important in understanding the society in India from Ghurye's point of view is rural urbanization. So rural urbanization was something that Ghurye kind of was concerned about, and he kind of gives us the idea of rural urbanization securing the advantages of urban life simultaneously with their nature's greenery. So the whole idea that there was kind of a migration from rural areas to city life was not something which was supported by his by Ghurye. Rather, he said that the entire process of urbanization should kind of be taken to the rural areas. So you kind of enjoy both the advance of modernity and industrialization. At the same time, one can enjoy the nature. So he discusses the process of rural urbanization in India. He views that the urbanization in India was not simply a function of industrial growth. In India, the process of urbanization, at least till recent years, started from within the rural areas itself. He traced Sanskrit texts and documents to illustrate the growth of urban centers from the need for market felt in a rural hinterland. So this is again an argument or a theory that is kind of contesting the argument that has been given to us by the Western scholars in terms of understanding urbanization as a city phenomena, as something which is happening only in the city life. And he is giving us a theory that the entire process of urbanization can be linked up to the rural area, where from the simple communal based production, the demand was moving towards a market life, and because there was a need of the market, there was a need to kind of adopt the certain economic production methods which could be a part of the urban India, and therefore he is also giving us evidence and data to kind of support his argument. The development of agriculture needed more and more markets to exchange the surplus in food grain. So basically, from economic point of view, if we see that because production was kind of happening earlier only in terms of the home mode production and consumption for subsistence, as society was getting transformed and the production was kind of not only for subsistence but was required to be exchanged in the market. This was the idea for the increase in the area of distribution in terms of the production moving out from one village to the other, from one rural area to the other, and this laid the foundation for urbanization. In many rural regions, one part of a big village started functioning into a market. This led to a township, which in turn developed administrative, judicial and other institutions. In the past, urban centers were based on feudal patronage, which had demands for silk clothes, jewelry, metal, artifacts and weapons. This led to the growth of urban centers such as Banaras, Kanchipuram, Jaipur and Moradabad. If we know this, these are all names which kind of got urbanized because of the production of specific goods, and therefore it is all kind of related to the source of urbanization coming in from the rural areas. Ghurye's approach to rural urbanization reflects the indigenous source of urbanism. During colonial time, the growth of metropolitan cities altered the Indian life. The towns and cities were no longer the outlets for agricultural produce and handicraft, but they became the major manufacturing centers. These centers used rural areas for producing raw material and turned into a market for selling industrial product. Thus, the metropolitan economy emerged to dominate the village economy. So, the entire idea that urbanism was kind of a very had its source in the city or in the urban area is kind of questioned, because Ghurye is tracing it back to the indigenous sources of agricultural and rural life. Urbanization started making inroad into the rural hinterland in contrast to the previous pattern. A large city or metropolitan also functioned as the center of culture of territory encompassing it. For Ghurye, the large city with its big complexes of higher education, research, judiciary, health service, print and entertainment is a cradle in innovation that ultimately serves cultural growth. So once production was surplus production had to be exchanged in the market, this market kind of is produced in the rural area were kind of seeing its market in a place which kind of started having an urbanism or the urban lifestyle. Then the other institution also started developing, like education, judiciary, and therefore it can be considered as a holistic progress of the society from rural area to urban cities. Now, the third topic of research is culture and civilization, where Ghurye examines the practices of human being with regard to disposal of discard of human body, like first out hair, nails, paring, first fallen teeth and afterbirth. So, he is focusing on the progress of civilization by looking into the bodily parts and the discarding of or throwing away of the essential a certain part of culture, where we kind of dispose of certain parts of our body as kind of considering as profane and not of any utility. He compares the methods of disposal of human placenta in the different regions of the world to see if they shed any light on the problem of diffusion of culture. According to Ghurye, culture constitutes the central or core element for understanding society and its evolution. In fact, culture is totally involving the entire heritage of mankind. Ghurye's abiding interest was to analyze the course of cultural evolution and the nature of heritage which mankind has denied from the past. Ghurye had a strong faith in the power of man to preserve the best of his old culture while creating from his own spirit of a new culture. He was more concerned with the process of evolution of Hindu civilization, which has been termed as a complex civilization. According to him, India has been the home of many ethnic stocks and culture from prehistoric time. So here we can see two important focus of Ghurye. One was the continuity from the past. We need to progress, we need to move ahead, but that does not imply that we kind of discard the past. The past is very, very important, and it's very important to retain the values and culture that we kind of get from the past. And the second is the idea of the diversity of Indian society, that in India different creed, language, religion kind of coexist, and it is kind of important to describe India as an ethnic stock and culture, and not in the contemporary time but from the prehistoric time. So he was prompted by the belief that there is a common heritage of modern civilization, and that civilization is a collective endeavor of humanity. So it is very important to understand that growth and progress is necessary, and it is not an individual task or an individual work. The growth of civilization is a collective endeavor of everyone, though they could be diverse in terms of the cultural practice, in terms of the religion, but the contribution is kind of collective. Everybody contributes towards it. He holds that behind the rise and fall of civilization, there has occurred a steady growth of culture. Cutting across the vicissitude of civilizational growth, there are certain values which have been established as final. These values have been termed by Ghurye as the foundation of culture. If we look into it, understanding what he considered as the foundation of culture, he gives us 5 elements. One is religious consciousness. The second is conscience. The third is free expression, that every individual in a society has the capacity to express himself or herself. The fourth is idea of justice. Justice is very important for any civilization to grow, because if it's a society which is not equally allocating resources, not equally kind of looking after every citizen, every member, then the idea of culture would not be conducive. And the fifth is free pursuit of knowledge. So all the 5 elements he says is conducive for the foundation of culture. And when he kind of looks into the Indian society, he kind of argues that all these 5 elements are found in Indian society since prehistoric time. And according to Ghurye, civilization is the sum total of social heritage projected on a social plane. It is also an attribute of the society. Different society can be differentiated with reference to the civilizational attainment, and not civilizational attainment only in technology or only in science, but very important to look back into the cultural and social achievement. So he looks into the nature of civilization. As yet, there has been no society which has been either completely civilized or highly civilized. That implies that each civilization is kind of undergoing some kind of transformation. There is no society which has kind of completely transformed and it's kind of end of it. So it is a continuum in which it is going, some are less civilized, some are more, but none are completely civilized. And therefore, what is the argument that comes in is that it is a continuous process. Social transformation, social change is a continuous process, and when we look into any kind of a civilization, the nature of the civilization can be grasped at when we look into the nature of social change which is undergoing. The gradation of civilization is also correlated with the distribution of values. Every civilization, high or low, possesses some distinctive values. So that is what is his understanding of culture and civilization, in terms of giving very significant importance on values which are part of the culture, which has been kind of not something which is taking in from other, but it is kind of indigenous, your own internal values which you need to kind of carry on and continue. The fourth area of research of understanding Indian society is national unity and integration. And as I have already said, that Ghurye had a nationalist orientation, and he was kind of very interesting in understanding the concept of integration, the process of national unity in India, and also kind of contemporary challenges that the society was facing. So it is also kind of a reflection of the time in which he is writing. There were a lot of problems, there were a lot of issues in terms of India being a diverse nation, and a lot of conflict in terms of religion, region was part of Indian society. So he kind of documents the way in which national unity and integration could be understood. This concern became apparent when at the time he wrote Caste and Race in India in 1932 and the Aborigine so-called and the Future in 1943. So when we read the two texts written by Ghurye over a period of almost a decade, his concern with the national integration and national unity is very clear. This concern with the present disturbing trends in Indian society has come back in a big way in the later writing. So initially he was more concerned about hinting at the notion of unity in nation as a unit. But when he sees the lot of conflicts, lot of tension in Indian society, he kinds of is disturbed by the conflict and trends. He has kind of given us three books which is in sociology referred as triology, and these triology or the three texts, it gives us a great idea of Ghurye's concept of nation and national integrity. The first text was Social Tension in India, which was published in 1968. The second book is Whither India, 1974. And the third text is India Recreates Democracy. When we look into the three titles, it is evident that Ghurye at the same time was trying to grapple with the emergence of large number of social and political issues which was disturbing or which was kind of questioning the nature of democracy in India, and therefore he kind of develops a theoretical framework to explain unity at the social and cultural level. In modern society, there are 5 sources of danger of our national unity coming as they do form a sense of excessive attachment with the group. So, Ghurye was of opinion that the threat to unity, the threat to nation comes on from a certain identity that we have, and these identities are of scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, the backward caste, the Muslim, that is religious identity, and the linguistic minority. So, the question of identity becomes very critical in understanding the notion of nation and national integrity. He was more concerned with the idea of Hindu culture and uses the term Indian culture and Hindu culture synonymously. His concern with India, he says, provided an excellent normative base for maintaining social and political unity in India. So when we go through his work, whether it be in terms of looking into the tribes, we look into the rural urbanization, the idea of civilization, or the question of national integrity, it is evident that Ghurye has certainly given us the foundational study of society in India. With this, I come to an end of today's lecture. Thank you.